Thanks, Kira, so much for joining us today. Do you mind explaining what informed is?
Absolutely. And Farouk, thank you for having me. This is been a delightful conversation every time we talk, and I'm excited to share that with more folks. So, I'm Shishkin, the CEO and founder of Informed, and Informed is the news concierge for the age of information overload, which we all, whether we admit it or not, live in. And what Informed does is it creates a trust layer that's been eroded over time between um, the news reader and the news industry as a whole. Over the last couple of decades, we've arrived at a place where news are no longer, uh, neutral. And they're all trying to steer you a direction. They all have an agenda. They try to, force you to pick sides. And on top of that, old news has a pretty strong perspective and bias to it. There's also just a strong emergence of this trend of like information overload. And anywhere you look, there isn't a lack of information or a lack of news for that matter. There is the opposite. There's too much noise. There's too much content, and you're forced to sieve through that. And it can be exhausting, especially when your full-time job is not to be a newsreader. And so with Informed, we try to solve both those problems at the same time of making news a lot more accessible to the everyday person, someone who just wants to know what's going on in the world without being influenced or overwhelmed in the process.
You mentioned traditional legacy media outlets have an incentive to spin the story to a certain extent, perhaps to maximize on sensationalism. Where in the timeline or the history of things do you think this started? Why did it start? What are your hypotheses?
I love this question because I feel like as a team, we have a pretty strong hypothesis. I definitely strongly agree with this. It's happened where the emergence of the kind of just the ease of publishing news online has led to a proliferation of sources that were claiming to be the provider of information. Right? It's like, I think it became with the .com kind of like blogger explosion where it became so easy and cheap to disseminate information that everybody wanted to, be part of that ecosystem. It's like, I'm going to blog about these news. I'm going to write about these news. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about that. And with the proliferation of options, the consumer, the newsreader, has sort of seized, like, just didn't want to pay anymore. Why would I pay, Farouk Media when I can just get it for free from the Kira News Digest services, right? And with that level of, you know, option overload, the newsreader gradually, but pretty suddenly, uh, stopped paying for news. And that was sort of the beginning of the end, because as the newsreader stopped paying for news at scale and stopped, being willing to pay for news, that's when the advertiser came in and said, hey, no one's paying for your news anymore. We will sponsor everybody's news if you just write about our product or about our socks or about our car or about our solar panels or this retirement plan. Just include this in your kind of like news real estate and we'll pay for all the news. We'll be sponsors. I think once that happened, and that happened pretty decisively across the industry, the news companies, news outlets, at least in the legacy way, began to tweak their business towards that part of the world of advertisers who are looking to engage, who are looking to clickbait, who are looking to, take more of your time rather than less, and engage you to click in even when you're not really interested in the topic. And so those practices quickly evolved into clickbait, into sensationalism, into dramatizing, sensationalizing of everything. And we got to a place where we, lost trust in the news, where most people don't really feel like they can trust news anymore. And even beyond that, there was a great resignation from news readership that happened as well. So now we arrive in a world where people don't read news, don't trust news, and the news industry has in no way recovered any of the credibility or any of the trust that it used to have before it was sold to the advertisers.
That's really interesting. To play back some stuff you said here, it sounds like there was a proliferation of news sources, and with those many players with competition drove down the price because people realized that they could get it for cheap or free. Then these news outlets have to decide how can they make money, and that's when these advertising giants or companies came in, sponsored these news outlets, and the incentive then became not to inform, which would have been the price signal before when I'm paying for my subscription to get my newspaper at my front door, but now it's to get as many people to click so that they can see an ad. And so then it becomes about making the best titles possible, spinning the story, keeping facts hidden in the dark until you go to the bottom and there's a one liner and it's not very clear what that means.
Absolutely. I mean, it's clickbait news. It's clickbait sensationalism that is sort of peppered throughout the industry. And you obviously get those on websites that are not very credible. There you can see them like right in front of your face. But the worst thing is you get them even on the very pillars of journalism, right? I'm talking about Associated Press, Guardian, BBC. You can see that on Reuters sometimes. You get clickbait behavior even among the most trusted news outlets. And that's how you just know, like the industry has rotted, like it's been rotting, and now it's fully, in decay. And part of the thesis that I have, and our company does, is we don't think there's a way back. Like we don't really think that there is suddenly going to be this like arc back to a rebound. I think the industry cannot correct itself. I think the way that trust is going to be rebuilt between the news reader and a person who's globally curious and interested in the world, and the kind of the news providers of the reporters and the outlets that publish news information, that disruption is not going to happen from within the industry. It's going to happen from disruptors outside of it. And so we take kind of a technological slash research heavy with the OSINT methodology, which is the open source investigation methodology. And we sort of don't think of ourselves as journalists. We don't think of ourselves as reporters, of course. We think of ourselves as researchers, and we think of ourselves as technologists who are here to disrupt the industry from the outside, because I've just not seen a journalist or a reporter or a media person from within the industry come up with any credible ideas for how to go back on the damage that they've done to this country. I'm speaking of like US broadly, and to the industry that they've destroyed. I think it's time for a hard reboot.
How did you become interested in this mission?
I think it comes definitely from like a personal frustration. I've always been very globally curious. I kind of grew up across three continents that are all were cursed in different ways, and I've just seen kind of the world speak different languages in the sense of like people drawing on different fact bases of truth. And I've seen like the consequences of that. People living in their own realities, the polarization, the isolation, disenfranchisement that happens when people don't operate with the same kind of fact base. And I've seen that play out in Ukraine, which is home for me, in Israel, which is, I would say, also home for me. I kind of spent my life between those two places before coming to the US. And then in the US, where we're literally in the middle of an information civil war right now. And I'm seeing that just, happen even more so. And people are living their own realities. They're polarized. They are disenfranchised in the process, and they're radicalized. And it happens not because of politics. It happens because of the news about politics. It happens not because of culture or society. It happens because of the news about culture and about society that we are fed, that is designed to trigger a response designed to clickbait and, evoke a reaction. And then, you get angry parts of population reading, instigating literature, instigating news. And then we're trying to figure out, why is the country so fractured? Why is the country so broken? Where have you seen our news? We're drinking from a poisoned well. And that definitely got me pretty motivated to try to make a difference in that specific way. And I felt like I've always been an information guy, a guy who loves to consume, absorb, digest, filter, analyze information. And so it felt like a perfect combination of, areas where I have natural strengths and interest with like the timing of it. It could not be more urgent and could not be more timely to do this now before it's far too late.
I know we talked a little bit offline. To me, the three prongs of the value proposition, the value that I get, and maybe many others from Informed, is that you get debiased news for the primacy of the sources that are attached. You save time because I don't have to go through hundreds of different sources. And then the most important to me is reduction in information overload. I know we touched a little bit on it. What are the downstream effects of information overload?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's resignation. I've never seen a human, or much less a group of humans, encounter an overload of information, this barrage of information everywhere you go, and then not resign from it. Right? Is because it's deafening. This noise is deafening. Where everywhere you go in the United States, there's radio playing on, your taxi ride from here to there. Then you get to the place, and maybe you're in a bar or in a hotel, and there is just screens all over with anchors on them talking about things, talking about things. You take out your phone, and there's notifications from everywhere from Apple News to news sources to online. Everyone's telling you, hey, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Something terrible has happened here. Something unbelievable has happened there. This constant barrage inevitably leads to resignation of like, just like, I can't listen to this stuff anymore. And what does that lead to further? It leads to self disenfranchisement, right? I think what we've gotten with this last election is whether you espouse the kind of Heritage Foundation policies and, the whole Trump kind of package. I think a lot of people felt like they didn't have a choice. And a lot of people who've made the choice they've made felt like they weren't properly informed in the act of making that choice. Like they didn't really make an informed choice. And that's what happens when you resign from consuming information. That's what happens when you resign from like being plugged into what's going on around in your environment. And that happens when you stop reading news. So I would say the political frustration that's happening on both sides of the aisle these days, and I think we're just in the early innings of that, and the overall social frustration, right, with this concept of, oh, Republicans are crazy, oh no, the liberals are crazy, etc. It comes from the fact that people have just stopped consuming information on like their own terms. They're only getting it in this sort of like, there's information overload. I don't want to have anything to do with it, so I'm kind of closing my ears. And then you become increasingly more vulnerable, which is maybe another sort of downstream effect. You become increasingly more vulnerable to misinformation. Because once you close your ears and you said, I can't listen to this stuff anymore, any information that does pierce your, membrane, winds up having a really large effect because you've essentially stopped consuming the buffet. And it can really disorient you. It can really trigger you, and it can really misinform you and like misdirect you in ways that are very consequential. So to sort of sum up to the answer to your question, it's sort of three things. It's resignation, self-disenfranchisement, self-radicalization, and maybe self-disinformation alongside there as well. So four kind of downstream effects of encountering information overload.
And I would just add the taxing effects on your energy levels and your focus and clarity in life, mental health, one might say.
Absolutely.
Definitely, definitely. What would you say to somebody who's saying, Kira, I think you're putting too high of a bar on the average person to become informed? Does the average person really have to know what the Department of Justice issued last week? Is this something that matters? Is political participation to that extent important?
Yeah, I think we're not a solution for everybody, right? Because there are people who are so blissful in their kind of like ear closed state. And I also don't want to rob them from that. As long as they're comfortable with the decisions that are being made around them, then you shouldn't have to worry about the news. If you're comfortable with where the ship is headed, I don't recommend you listen to weather updates, or the radio or any sort of, who cares? Who cares? The keep, what's the Titanic analogy? Like keep dancing in the ballroom, nothing to worry about. But if you're someone who has any inkling of like, I would like to know things before they happen, or I would like to maybe even like know things with some intention of having an impact on them before they happen, right? Maybe it's a small impact, or maybe it's just a curiosity. I just want to know what's going on in my environment. That's the people that we build for, right? Is we build for people who want us. We're not building for everybody, uh, and we're not building for people who don't like, who don't care. But we're finding that there isn't like a split of like there's people who just don't care about the world and people there are. We find more and more is that a lot of people care. Like the vast majority of people are either curious or want to have an impact or just want to be informed before it's too late to be kind of already told what's happening. They just don't have a really easy way to be informed because the legacy media and the solutions that exist today have not made it easy to stay informed. And so we find that there isn't a shortage of people who care. There is a shortage of ways for people who care to get information in a non-toxic way, in like a very accessible way. So we've seen that to be more of the split. And we try really hard to kind of make news accessible and make news, easy to consume. We want to help change a habit of news consumption from something that is draining and exhausting to something that is a kind of morning routine that takes you a minute, maybe takes you 2 minutes, but it isn't overwhelming enough that it takes over your entire day or takes more time than it should take, which is seconds, maybe minutes.
So, kind of getting to the crux of my project here, how can AI help and hurt information overload?
Absolutely. I mean, I love this question. And every time I get to talk about this, like, this is probably one of the most important parts of Informed. And it is, we have this vision that with the advent of AI, and especially where we're headed with the news industry, it's becoming so much easier to create noise, right? It's for you to create content, right? We now have artificial intelligence. We have artificial voice. We have artificial video. We have artificial images. We have artificial like writing content creation. We have artificial podcasts. We can create any type of media with a pretty high, a high quality, a high bar for quality pretty easily. It's cheap, it's instant, and we can spit it out in such volumes that frankly, like I don't know how much of LinkedIn is still authentic. Like it's probably less than half. I don't know how much of like TikTok and Instagram is still authentic. I was talking to a friend entrepreneur who specializes in creating like bot TikTok accounts, like bot celebrity accounts. And I'm like, wow, like I've just seen his setup and I was like, oh my goodness, like this is not a future state. We are already living in a reality where a good share of our social media, a good share of our internet is already manufacturing. And so with the news, I mean, that's one of the easiest things to manufacture, right? Because there's no voice, there is no video. It doesn't have to be. It's just articles. It's just content. And all you need is pushing a few buttons for that. And it's only going to get easier and cheaper and faster. So the ability to churn out like news looking content is extremely easy. And it's already easy and it's only going to get easier. So what I think is we're going to see a lot more noise, so much more noise than we have now. And now it feels already pretty overwhelming. we're going to see a lot more noise than that yet. And it's sad, it's frustrating, it's going to be very difficult for a time. And there's going to be two sides. There's going to be people who are leveraging AI to create noise. And I feel like that's a lot of people right now. And there's going to be people like informed, people like us, who are using AI to undo the damage done by that side and actually use it to filter. Because AI is just as good at filtering as it is at, multiplying the noise. And so a really large focus for us is going to be how can we leverage AI to read more, to consume more, and to see through that, misinformation overload to get to a place where we can surface what's truly significant and what's truly important so that the user can read less but know more as a result.
I'm curious, is there an example of information overload leading to some issue or problem with another person causing some sort of harm that you've seen, whether that's related to the news or otherwise?
Yeah. I was going to just say one more thing on your previous question because I think
Sure.
it's a powerful thing to mention. Like, I don't think reading news without AI, without the AI filter, is going to be possible in the next few years. So it's like, we're thinking right now of like, oh, like there's the AI noise makers and there's the AI filterers. I actually think that with the way we're headed, with how everything's becoming so much noisier, the ads are becoming better and noisier and more kind of numerous. The the personality content, the celebrity content, the influencer content, the kind of news category is just exploding in every direction. Like, I'm not even sure you can consume any type of content without an AI filter in the future. And I definitely don't think you're going to be able to consume news content in the next couple of years without any sort of filtering. I think like reading news without a filter is gone. I don't think that's in the cards anymore. The amount of information overload before AI was already deafening. Now with AI, we're gonna need new tools to see through the noise. So it's just a thought I wanted to share for your early question. Would you mind repeating your question just now as well?
Yeah, I was curious if there's an example that sticks out in your head, whether in your life or generally in the world, in regards to information overload leading to some issue or harm to other people. When we talk about ethics, which is kind of what I'm exploring with AI, I'm concerned with harm that could be committed against yourself or others when leveraging AI or information.
Think it's fascinating. I've only heard of stories. I don't know that I'm connected to any story that I could like personally speak to. Um, Maybe that's a good thing. But yeah, I don't have a specific story of like a person who was a victim to what I call misinformation overload. Like, I don't even call it information overload anymore. It's misinformation overload. I don't think I've seen like I've heard of three things. What I've like heard about, so I haven't experienced personally. One, obviously, there's this famous case of somebody using AI for self-help and sort of therapy, and AI being so soft in terms of like, it matches whatever you're saying, whatever you're feeling, and kind of tries to like appease you. That I believe the person was recommended to commit suicide because once you say like, "Hey, I'm feeling all these kinds of things," I want to commit suicide. And AI is like, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's sort of like, it's at this point, it's a meme that, AI just like says, you're absolutely right. Um, I think there's a lot of dangers in that. I think you're seeing a lot of spend from OpenAI right now on the trust and safety teams. They're dishing out absurd amounts of money to try to like, protect the surface area of damage that is opened up. So I think there's obviously like individual use case of you using an AI in like a too self-affirming of a way where it recommends you something that a human would stop you from doing, right? A human would be like, hey, actually, no, you shouldn't, uh, you know, kill yourself. So I think that's like one use case that I've heard a lot about. I have not experienced personally, or I've had anyone in my community experience. I think the maybe category number two is just we are so vulnerable to images. And so there's a lot of us still outside of the Silicon Valley bubble, outside of the tech AI world bubble that like cannot tell AI images from real images. There's a lot of older people who just cannot do that. And that's only getting like the imagery is only getting better and higher fidelity. So this problem is only going to like continue and progress. And I think there's a lot of damage when you can create an image that, indicates a falsehood, something that hasn't happened that is now captured and it spreads through social media and people just see it. Just seeing it influences your judgment and influences your perspective, even if you know it's false. So forget the retired grandmother who cannot tell an image that's AI generated versus not. Even us who are like AI native, perhaps AI prone, like we know what we're looking at, just seeing false images uh, rubs off on our subconscious. And I think that can have political implications, social implications, cultural implications, and it can really exacerbate a lot of the risks that we already experience in our society around what we believe to be true versus not. Um, so that's maybe category number two. Like, I think the category three is just obvious. I don't know if I need to voice it. It's around somebody just spinning up a story that is not true and doing that at a scale where even though you maybe are questioning it, if it's created at a scale where there's so many different accounts that are publishing this different versions of the same thing, like the AI assisted gossip, I think is a very scary action. Like the AI generation of gossip, which can happen across any domain, is frightening to me.
The example of doctored images via AI reminds me of an article I read almost 4 years ago now, so prior to GPT. It was, I think, in Bangladesh or somewhere in that eastern part of the world where there was fake images of a minority group, probably Muslims, where it was depicting them torturing the natives or the majority group, people of the majority group, and they were posted on Facebook, and it was being leveraged to move forward with the genocidal effort against this minority group. And that's when I realized that AI image doctoring could be used to distort reality to produce unethical behavior en masse. And that was scary. I can only imagine that getting worse with deep fake videos too.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so frightening. Yeah, I would consider that like the misinformation, the gossip that gets created with so much more ease. It's like unbelievable. I think the rise of tools that help us distinguish fact from fiction, tools that help, you know, filter everything that's fake out, and that's their whole function is to filter out the the falsehood. I think we're going to see a huge rise in that sort of technology. I think it's much needed. It's already overdue. Like I'm surprised we don't have more safety tools in place. And it's I just hope we build more of those tools before any more real damage happens. Um, and I hope there's people out there who are building safety tools, uh, tools to distinguish fact from fiction, tools to sieve the noise and the misinformation from what is actually happening. And I think every single company that does any sort of content sharing, whether that's a social media platform or like a media channel, maybe in a more traditional way, I think is going to have to take it upon themselves to also filter like fact from fiction and sort of take some more responsibility for, I think, like putting up a wall of like checkers, robots, and anti fake imaging AI that would keep people safe. But I think the surface area for how much we could build in that space is continuously growing, and I'm not actually seeing as much action there. Everyone is rushing to automate your next SDR. Everyone's rushing to automate your next employee, but I think we need to be automating as much as possible, like in the safety measures behind all these things. And we're doing that, in such a small niche in the news world, but there are so many other domains where this needs to be built and needs to be built with a sense of urgency.
I want to switch gears here to talk about entrepreneurship. What do you think will be different about AI entrepreneurship, which AI and entrepreneurship are synonymous in my head at this point in 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that the same foundations are going to remain true. Like AI is going to be a huge upgrade in the tools that we have, and it's going to allow us to obviously do things with so many less people than before. I think it's going to allow us to just have a much higher bar for quality and just fidelity is going to. I think AI is not going to lead to a slop. I think it's going to a great degree, lead to a rising of the bar of what we think of as high quality. So I think maybe like three thoughts. I think one is the foundations are going to remain. Like what makes you an entrepreneur is not can you program an AI application layer or can you program like an interesting tool. That's not what makes an entrepreneur. That's what makes like a kid with a hobby. An entrepreneur is somebody who sees problems and can absorb problems of the world and make sense of them, can interpret problems of the world. And that's not an easy thing to do and can articulate solutions to those problems. And some of them may involve AI, some of them may involve other technology, some of them may involve just other human beings that have nothing to do with technology whatsoever. But an entrepreneur is somebody who is able to interpret problems and articulate solutions. And that is not an easy, like that is rocket science. And I think anyone is capable of that rocket science, but I just don't like to make it synonymous with being a technologist. I think you can be a technologist and you can be an entrepreneur. I think maybe in both of our cases, we happen to be both, but the entrepreneur foundations are not about being a techie. They are much more about solving problems and having a passion for that. So I think that's going to remain the same no matter what technological schisms we're going to experience. Number two is I think we're going to see a lot smaller teams. I think we're going to see a lot more solopreneurs, so less co-founders and just like smaller teams overall, uh, apart from the founder teams. I think that's an interesting trend that we're already seeing quite prominently. I think even the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a huge rise in the solopreneur category of a person who it's like, I don't need a co-founder. I don't need a team that's large. I got this on my own. And I think we're going to continue seeing that at scale is like people building solo because it's going to be more accessible. And three is the quality thing that I mentioned. Just I don't believe AI is going to lead to slop, maybe in the near term, but overall, I think AI is going to lead in a grand elevation of the bar across everything. Because I like to use kind of like a school example. If, for example, a school teacher allows students, maybe it's like, I don't know, middle school to use AI, which I feel like a lot of schools, can't really help it. Like you can't really stop that from happening. So, and you allow kind of students to use AI to write an essay. So you would think, oh, great, anyone's going to come and they're going to have these like AI essays and they're all going to get a good mark as a result of it. But we all know that's not going to happen because as the teacher reads 20 of the same ChatGPT essays, she's going to be like, well, this is all absolute crap. Like you guys are all failing this class and you need to step it up. And so it's almost like the bar is going to get so much higher because now you have to be using AI to just like get started and get a first draft going. But what's going to help you stand out from everybody else who's also already using AI is have a great sense of taste, a great sense of judgment, a great sense of like prompt engineering around like, not only am I using AI, but I'm doing it in a sophisticated way and I'm using a ton of judgment in the process. And so I think maybe in the first few weeks, the teacher is not hanging on. Like she's not perhaps like, you know, getting it. She's not understanding that she's reading the same essay over and over again. But a few weeks is going to pass and she's going to say, actually, this is messed up. And in order to stand out in the class, you can't just deliver, a 3-page essay. You need to build something. You need to present something that is truly differentiated. You need to have the best essay. And now, okay, we had 3 weeks of AI slop, but now it's over. Like the AI slop days are over. Now, in order to stand out, you better be training your own models. Sixth grader, you better be building your own white papers. You better actually, trade different models for different use cases and have the judgment to decide what actually is the final best result. That's not going to be AI slop anymore. That's going to be an elevation of the bar across every discipline. The school example is just one small speckle in that world across the entire world. And I think the quality of thinking, the quality of content output is going to be tremendous. And I'm really looking forward to it.
That's really interesting. I've actually never heard of that perspective, but it makes sense. Competitive pressures leading to better end results as a way to differentiate from what was previously slop. It's interesting because I was also thinking about how we discussed legacy media outlets and how they all became cheap and accessible and everything became same, really. And instead of there being a competitive pressure to now, okay, how do I differentiate myself from everybody else by maybe producing the highest quality news for free? Instead, the incentive structure changed so that advertisement companies came in and maximized on sensationalism. Is there a worst case scenario in AI where something like that happens?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think Meta is already doing, I think they've set a goal that, by, was it next year, most of their advertisements are going to be AI run. I think the death of kind of, or the worst case scenario, at least coming from the news example and like our industry that we're active in, is if ads somehow make their way into ChatGPT and make their way into like all the models. Because now, why would I pay for ChatGPT where I can get I can kind of shift together, what is it called? Stitch together a bunch of free versions. Like I'll use Perplexity for these things, I'll use Anthropic for those things, I'll use ChatGPT, and boom, I don't have to pay anybody. Why would I pay $20 a month or even more where I can sort of get away by using the free version? Like, I mean, I don't actually think we're close to that happening because I think a lot of people really do value the feature expansion, and I think the feature expansion is going to continue to be gated behind the price point. But I think a share of people are going to say, I don't want to pay for AI at all. Why would I? AI is everywhere anyway. Everyone's selling me AI from every layer. So I'm not going to pay for AI. And maybe that type of consumer is actually going to get ads in their AI, like chatbot experience. And that's going to be disgusting. I think that's going to be so much worse than what happened to the news. It's terrible, right? And so I think that's the worst case scenario is if ads enter the free user experience of an AI tool. And obviously the other side I want to mention earlier is if AI enters ad machines and becomes so good at advertising that we're just going to go crazy. I don't know I guess you could make an argument that really good ads is a good thing because that's what you want. But I don't know. I'm not quite there yet on believing that. I don't I don't want ads to be better. I just want there to be no ads as much as possible. I'm so tired of being solicited every step of the way in this economy, in this country, in this world. Just stop soliciting me, please.
That's interesting. Why would advertisements in GPT be worse than, say, the legacy media outlets being bought out by ad companies? To me, it doesn't seem the downstream effects of ads in GPT is it's boring unless I'm missing something else. While for news outlets, it's misinformation and sensationalism.
I think maybe partially because we turn to news to answer a certain type of question about the world. It's like, what the hell is going on right now? or like what's going on in Korea, like what's the drama there, or what did Trump do last, or like is there an earthquake in California, or is there an earthquake in like I don't know somewhere else? Like we're going there for a specific type of question, but we're going to like uh, AI tools for all kinds of questions. So we're spending some fraction of our time like looking at the news. We spend all of our time looking for answers to a question. Hey, how do I cook this thing? Hey, how do I fix this? How do I like put engine oil in my car? Which car should I buy? Is this the best car? Compare these cars. Wait a second. Is orange juice actually healthy for you? Like all these, shower thought questions combined with, the news questions combined with like purchasing decisions because so many people go to chats for purchasing decisions. If all of those conversations are now being peppered with ads, like that's a really tough environment because how can you trust that you're going to get a fair analysis, right, of which car should you buy if this is also the same platform that's recommending cars to you? And how can you like trust that they're going to give you the right instructions for how to put engine oil in your car if it's also the same platform that's advertising engine oil changes in your area? It's like, I just think, with the news side, it was still limited, right? People were selling you cars, socks, longevity products, random, like, I don't know what they were selling, like, doctors hate this one trick type of stuff. But now with AI, that's just like, it's everything because you go there for every question. So every time you have a curiosity, you go there, right? No one's using search anymore. Um, and every question that you answer, like, you're no longer safe, right? Because when people are soliciting you, it's a type of emotional, financial, psychological uh, unsafety, so to speak. And it would be a real shame to, take AI and make it a place of solicitation. It would, I think, completely defeat the purpose. And it'll be it'll be a waste of an amazing thing.
Ray Kurzweil, the futurist, believes that we'll have AGI by 2027. I like to think of that time as a good reference point of future generations. With that in mind, what's one thing you'd like to leave future generations with about AI and the human experience?
I think, AI is moving so quickly. You and I know that we're on the front lines of that. We have first row seats to that. But you know what's happening even quicker? It's the erosion of trust in AI by like the everyday person. Like, we live in a bubble, right? We're both techies and founders and futurists and AI enthusiasts. But if you go to the streets, like if you go to the people who aren't all of those labels that I just mentioned, people are super skeptical. People are super uncomfortable and they're like, I don't want to have anything to do with AI. I don't want AI in my soup. I don't want AI in my news. I don't want AI anywhere. And so the trust that's eroding in AI is happening extremely fast. And just one mistake for like a new entrant into the AI world, just one mistake could completely kill the entire kind of optimism around AI for a person. So I think we are still like you and I were living in a bubble. I think the world is still very low consumption, very low on adoption of AI. And I think the trust is still not there. Um, I'm not even sure it's going to get there anytime soon. Like we may get to AGI by 2027, whoever's projections those are, but I don't think we're going to get to a place where the world trusts AI by 2027. I think it's going to take a lot longer if we even get there. I mean, I think we will get there eventually, but it's going to take a while because people are really skeptical. Like the streets are really skeptical around this technology. And it's easy to see why, because just cookie shit keeps happening, right? It's like, there's still so many mistakes. There are all these very simple logical puzzles that you ask an LLM to do, and they just give you the wrong answer. And you're like, this is clearly not logical thinking. And so, the short answer is I think that there's a lot more room to grow on the trust side of like humans trusting technology, humans trusting AI technology before we start fantasizing or even thinking about all these exciting new AGIs intelligence milestones that we've had ahead of us. Like we have those milestones and we're going to get there, sure. But I think there's a huge battle to fight of getting people comfortable with just trusting in this technology, a lot of which is about educating them of what this technology is and what it isn't. I think there's a lot more work to do there. And uh, yeah.
And when we do get to AGI, do you imagine something? What are your thoughts on having to treat artificial intelligence at the human level artificial intelligence with the same respect as other humans? What are the ethical questions, if any, that come up in your head when we think of AGI and humans?
It's interesting because I think being nice, being polite is always a good idea. I don't know if I'm the kind of person who is so polite that they say thank you every time, Anthropic answers a question. I don't think I do that. I don't think I'm going to start doing that. Um, but like, I think not abusing machines is probably like a good idea because I just abusing anything is a behavior that like can rot other parts of your identity and your life. So I think just not being mean is a good start to to objects as much as to humans. Um, I think when AGI is here, right? And I'm not even saying if, I'm saying like when AGI is here, it may be worth it to anthropomorphize it a little bit more. Like not make it look like a robot, but like make it look really human. Give it a face, give it like an identity that is like you can relate to. Because there's a lot of animals like currently that sort of like have human like awareness and like feelings, etc. Because they don't look like us, we don't give them as much credit. Like we don't really care about how they feel. So like that's very often like the fish argument or something. Like I don't know about the fish, but like I don't know exactly which animals, but if it doesn't look like us, it's harder for us to kind of give it human treatment. So I think one thing that's going to help a lot is like anthropomorphizing AI. And I think we're going to see a lot of that happening in the future. And I think it's still, maybe it's like a different angle to an answer to your question. It's still going to be important to not put AI over a human because in the end of the day, AI does not have a life. Like they may be self-aware, they may be aware. And I think that's also super exciting. But if you feed on electricity and wattage and, someone else feeds on, you know, nourishment and, human touch, I think it would be important not to try to like not to try to pit against like AI versus human and just keep in mind that whatever we manufacture winds up still being a tool. And we should not be mean to our tools, but we shouldn't elevate them or like try hard to elevate them to a human level because I think that I don't know if there's a because. I just don't think we should do that. I think there may be downstream implications that we are not yet anticipating, but are probably not going to be good ones.
Great. Was there anything else you wanted to touch back on or make any final comments?
I feel like I don't know how many of like your listeners know of what we're doing with Informed, but I would say the human in the loop model is something that like is super important that that I think we'll see a lot more of as well, especially in this like transition period to AGI. And even once we reach AGI and superintelligence and etc., I still think like the human in the loop model, which, in short is just the act of having AI do a lot of the work, most of the work, but still having a human supervise that process. I think that so far is the best way to leverage AI. It's like you have it do most of the stuff, but not everything, because AI is really far from doing everything. Like all these talks about AGI in 2027, super intelligence, the whole like, Meta spending all their money on AI development. I think it's phenomenal. I think all that should continue happening. But we are so far. Like we are so far from end-to-end reasoning in AI. Like just to give you an idea, we spent all the money in the world on LLMs. And LLMs are not reasoning machines. And we kind of all know that, or we should all know that. So we spent all our resources so far, all the venture money, all the PE money, all the private money, all the public money. We just spent all the money we have, like dipping it into LLMs. And we also all know that LLMs in their nature are not capable of reasoning. So we put all these resources, all this effort towards machines that mimic reasoning, but don't actually reason. And so I think we're getting better and better at LLMs, and LLMs do a pretty good job at mimicking human thinking because human thinking is not that deep. Like, we're distracted. We are disoriented. We are silly. We're always out of time. We're rushing through decisions. Like, they can already mimic that for sure. But you can see through the different like logical puzzles that are widely available online of like how to trick an LLM that these machines don't think at all. They don't reason. And so we may be pretty far on the LLM development side, but we are at like -1 to 0, maybe 1 at development of reasoning capable AI. And we need reasoning capable AI. I mean, forget AGI and superintelligence. We need reasoning capable AI just to outsource any process end to end. Because if it's not reasoning, how can we possibly give it end to end decision making? And that's very much the kind of the epiphany, the realization with Informed is we're not going to be there with our AI or with the industry AI for years. 2027 is a pipe dream with like end to end process handover to AI is like a decade sounds like a lot of time because we have now all these other tools to help us code, help us discover, help us think. But it's definitely like, I would say 5 years is not a bad estimate. We are really starting from zero with reasoning AI. And until we get to like substantial progress on reasoning AI, not LLMs, we're going to need a human in the loop model, which is what Inform does. And like what we specialize in is AI does most of the work, but humans still are involved. And I think we're going to see more and more companies kind of wake up to that realization of like, hey, we got really excited about this AI thing. Turns out we can't really trust it end to end. And we're going to need to insert humans at the right strategic points. So I think the next few years are going to be, we're going to see a lot of human in the loop businesses, a lot of human in the loop AI innovations and just business models. And I think that's great because I think that's the next generation. I definitely am not prepared to say next generation is fully AI handover. I think we're really far from that.
And this might be a small disagreement, but I do think we have reasoning machines. I just think the data sets are too small. An example of that is I've been seeing a lot of people post around media is that if you ask ChatGPT to produce an image of a watch that has any other time except I think it's like 1212, it won't produce it. And the reason is because the data set is of all advertised watches, which will show the exact same image of a watch with the two hands perfectly even. And so to me, that's like having a baby who's only seen watches that are evenly split for in their entire life. Their schema of a watch is constrained to all the info they've been absorbed throughout their life. It's the same thing for a chatbot. I think fundamentally the architecture allows for reasoning. The data sets are too small. The data speed is too small. And as long as you scale those data sets and compute power, you should have reasoning abilities. But it's a minutia point, maybe.
I think it's a really interesting point, and I don't think it's a small one. I think that is true around like, the sizes of the training modules. At the same time, I think maybe there's a part of reasoning that entails being able to like imagine outside of the training set. And like maybe that's what superintelligence is about. But like if your only reasoning capabilities are reasoning within a certain like constraint of a database, even if it's a huge one, I still don't think I'm prepared to call that reasoning. Like that's just like a trained, it's almost like it's trained reasoning, but it's not real reasoning, right? It's like a reasoning machine should be able to imagine a watch on the basis of everything it's seen that doesn't have that doesn't fit the 12 o'clock mold. Like to me, reasoning should entail almost like a little bit of reasoning outside of the data set itself. So I think it also obviously matters how you define reasoning. The other big caveat is like the ambiguity of a prompt, right? It's like if you're building a machine that only reasons in like creates watch models, and you give it so many watch models that maybe now it can actually think outside its training base. There are some tasks that are so ambiguous and so complex that I don't know if there is ever a big enough data set that can enable reasoning for that machine. And what is a prime example of that level of complexity? Like multidimensional complexity is news, right? It's essentially like all information of the world. You cannot easily just feed it all the old news or even like all the new news. You cannot even like synthesize. I mean, synthesizing is not going to be a good idea for training a news model. But even if you were to give it like all the news of the world ever produced, I still don't think it would be capable of dealing with the complexity of a task of like go through the news and tell me fact from fiction and tell me what's most significant and like don't make a mistake, right? I think the ambiguity and complexity of that task is so great that like I'm not sure how like if you have the largest imaginable data set, I still don't think it's enough to conquer this use case. And that's why like on the informed side, we don't even try to. Like we've have our theses around like that is so complicated. We are not getting there anytime soon. So we keep the human in the loop for that purpose of like there are elements of judgment that we're just not going to hand off to AI anytime soon. Doesn't mean we're not going to hand off most of the work, the scraping, the analysis, the kind of like weighing of things, the actual reading of things, the interpreting of things, the significance ranking of things. But the ultimate judgment, we're not going to hand over. Not until we have confidence that we can. And I don't think we're going to get that confidence for, 2027 is a pipe dream. Maybe 2035. That'd be nice.
And just because I find this very interesting, your first point, that reasoning requires thinking outside of your data set. I disagree because I can't think of that example for humans who they can't reason outside of what they know, right? Unless I guess you're, tapped with divinity or something, right? Outside of the basic structure of data that we all have. Um, so that would be my pushback.
I think it's interesting, right? It's like, do we really reason only within our own database?
Hmm.
It's hard to tell because I think epiphanies and like eureka moments are possible. And are they always a function of an existing data set? I don't know. Like maybe you can have that that like framework of human knowledge as like everything we experience is a collection of impressions that we've collected over time. I'm not so prepared to say that I fully believe that. I think it's a very hard thing to like wrap your head around. Like I'm not sure I would have confidence to say the opposite, but I do believe that humans are capable of like thought unconstrained by a database. That's like one answer. The second one is we have many databases, right? It's like if we're confronted with an answer to a question of like, can we design a new watch design? We're not just resting on the database of all the watches we've seen, right? Our context is actually all the databases of our experience, like our first memories with, our mother, our first memories of like going to school, like our first experience of color, like all these different things are different databases that all together create this ocean. like we have access to all the databases. While when you're training an AI model for specifically like watch creation, it only is going to have the context of watch creation. So it's like, what do you call the database of databases that we have access to, which is so unquantifiable and so huge, and we don't always know what's inside of it too, because some things kind of like turn on and off because that's just how memory works. Sometimes we remember these things, sometimes we don't. Like that uncertainty around the multiplicity of databases, their absolute like unquantifiable amount, I think that creates a a something that isn't as simply reduced to like a database of watch images. And I think that's like a pretty unique human feature that I don't think we can program yet. But also back to my like original point is I do think there's something that we humans experience, and we call an epiphany, a eureka moment that actually goes outside of our like outside of our collection of impressions.
It's very interesting. I think we found our topic for our next podcast. Um, well, thank you so much, Kira. This was a pleasure and a delight, and hope to talk again.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me on. I've had a great time.